Kgothatso, welcome to the Bitcoin Source. Can we start things off by you introducing yourself to the world?
Hola, I'm Kgothatso Ngako, and I'm a software engineer that comes from Pretoria, South Africa. And I've been working on a project called Machankura, which is basically aims to give people without internet connected devices the ability to send and receive Bitcoin.
Nice, nice. Kgothatso, thank you for that introduction. And I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today because, Africa, that's where my parents are from. And I really think that it's crucial to have developers and innovators in the space, especially in Bitcoin, kind of doing things that will change the world. And one of the questions I want to ask you is, where did you source your Bitcoin knowledge, whether it was people, conferences, or even books in the ecosystem that it might have helped you to become a better Bitcoiner?
Well, man, Bitcoin Twitter, most of the biggest Bitcoiners in the space are some of the most highly accessible people in the world. And they also write very good articles. So it's quite easy for you to find something you find informative, and they also write these articles in a way that the average individual could easily consume. So yeah, Bitcoin Twitter for me has been a good pool of knowledge, and I've been using that to kind of figure out, oh, this is worth reading, this is not worth reading, so on and so forth.
Yes, nice, most definitely. And I think that Twitter for me has been beneficial as well. I really like to read more books and articles per se, but Bitcoin Twitter has allowed my writings and my articles to kind of get to a wider audience. And I think that, when you jump in spaces and you talk to people from all over the world, it's allowed me to really connect with more people from Africa talking about Bitcoin and the innovation that's going on there. And I really want to get into Machankura, which is your app. And this app is very unique and different because it is solving a solution in Africa that has been a really big problem, which is gaining access to Bitcoin without the internet. And the first question that I want to ask you, Kgothatso, is, transferring Satoshis without the need for the internet is a huge, for Bitcoin adoption. And I wanted to know, like, what led you to create, this application when many people believe that, Bitcoin is very reliant on the internet.
So for me, it was a question I asked myself after setting up a Raspberry Pi. And I was like, oh, now that I have this Raspberry Pi, what am I going to do with it? So then I took a dive on this project where I was like, oh, it would be cool if people would be able to, send and receive Bitcoin without the internet. And then I worked myself from there to what are the available technologies and how would that thing look like. And as a consequence, this project now exists. Right. And so Lightning addresses were a thing that I could use. USSD is already a thing that we use quite a lot of in across the African continent. And so now we're here.
Nice. And what is the sign up process for Machankura? So let's say, for example, I'm in Ghana, I have a mobile phone, and I want to send someone Bitcoin in Malawi, but they don't have a smartphone. Like, how is that process with Machankura?
As long as you know the person's number, you can effectively send them the Bitcoin, right? We'll send an SMS to them. But of course, we cannot confirm the delivery of the SMS. So it's best if you communicate with them and say, yo, I'm sending you Bitcoin via this service. But if they do get the SMS, what will happen is they will see the code that they have to dial to access the service. Right? So it's *8. Hopefully, it's *833# hash, and then a person is able to dial into the service and access the service. And once they dial the code, they'll be presented with a menu of what Machankura is. Maybe I'll add a message to say they've been gifted how many Satoshis or how many Bitcoin, and then give them an option to then create an account to claim the sats. And creating an account, all they have to do is enter a 5-digit PIN, and that's pretty much
Yeah,
it.
and I think that 5-digit PIN is really huge because it kind of gives more privacy, more security. And I just think that the app is just groundbreaking and completely monumental because, for example, my father's from Ghana and he lives in a very rural area of Ghana, and sometimes there's not good cell phone service or there's no internet access at all. There's no cell towers. So I think if you have like a Nokia or a Digicel or a Caracera phone, it's super easy for you to just put in a text and send someone satoshis maybe that are in Accra or Kumasi somewhere, a little bit further south. And I just think that this application is really going to change the way that Africa adopts and transfers Bitcoin. And I'm just super happy to have you on this show because I think that your story needs to, be embraced around the world, and more developers like yourself are going to be coming from Africa. And, you recently did the conference at, the Bitcoin Africa conference in Ghana. And, what was it like meeting Jack Dorsey and Jack Mallers and so many big Bitcoiners in the space?
Yeah, so I only met Jack Marlins. I didn't get to meet Jack Dorsey. I was too busy meeting almost everyone else. But I enjoyed the conference, got to meet so many of the people that I intended on meeting. Highlight person. Well, everyone I met, don't take this personally, but highlight person being Magat Wade. Had a good conversation with her. She's one of the people I think have the correct assessment of what we need in Africa, in terms of what prosperity would look like. And yeah, I enjoyed the conversation, and it actually validated how I assessed her from the internet. And yeah, met so many other people, had so many different conversations that are still ongoing now, right? And yeah, it has really has me feeling like we're gonna have a lot happening in the Bitcoin space over the next year. I also met Lamar, had a great conversation with him and heard about some of the stuffs he's trying to do, and I hope to see him roll that stuff out because yeah, it's really great ideas. And one thing I know is Bitcoin is not where it could be, right? So if everyone pitches in and everyone does what they feel like doing, which is in most cases the missing element in with regards to where we could get it with adoption. So we'd be in very interesting locations. So yeah, that's basically my takeaway from that conference. And I'm still feeling like, 2023 is going to be one hell of a year.
Most definitely. And I'm glad that you brought up some of those things because Bitcoin is not a silver bullet. And I understand that in Africa, that's why I try to do my part by working with Satoshi's Journal and having these foundations and donating to Africa because Africa has a lot of issues, complex issues, dealing with poverty that I think the first world kind of ignores or doesn't pay attention to. And I think myself being a first generation African living in America, it is my duty to really give back to my communities and the people that live on that continent. So I'm glad to have this conversation with you, but I'm also glad to hear that you highlight that certain people have the right direction and understanding of what Bitcoin in Africa is going to look like. And I think that that's important for you to kind of be aware of because as this thing gets bigger and more important, you want to make sure that you have people that are really aligned with your goals and what you want to see for Machankura, for example. So thank you for kind of bringing that out to the world because I think that's important. People go to Africa and then they kind of get overwhelmed with the culture and the food and the positivity, but they have to realize that there's a lot of suffering and poverty that people on the ground are trying to fix, such as yourself.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Right. And in the most cases, I think most Africans have all the tools that they need. Oh, not all of them, but most of the tools that they need to get themselves outside of whatever situation that they're in. And Bitcoin is just an extra tool in that toolkit, right? So even on my side, I quit working as a software developer 2 years ago, right? And part of the reason I was able to make such a decision is because of Bitcoin. It gave me the peace of mind to say, I'll be okay. Whatever happens, happens. And then I'll have the peace of mind to work on projects like this, right? So, yeah, then I'm more interested in seeing what would happen in the rest of the continent if more and more people use Bitcoin as a tool moving forward.
Yes, and Bitnob and Strike recently just partnered at the conference, and it made me wonder, and I was curious to see, like, Machankura, like, does Machankura in the future plan on partnering with any other exchanges or companies to kind of expand their network and their capabilities, or are you just looking to make Machankura kind of more, with high signal and low noise, and just really focusing in on kind of allowing this to build into other countries and having more people have access to SMS with your tech service.
Yeah. So my main focus is just giving people the ability to send and receive Bitcoin, right? That being said, like even with Bitnob, ever since the earliest days of this project, Machankura users and Bitnob users have been sending Bitcoin to each other because both Bitnob and Machankura have support for Lightning addresses, right? And this interoperability then happened without me even ever talking to Bernard, So I'd like to see more and more of such integrations moving forward. But, also knowing that I don't even have to talk to these guys to get such integrations because Bitcoin is an open permissionless network, right? So as long as my users are able to send and receive Bitcoin and you create a service that sends and receives Bitcoin, then technically my users become your users through some way, shape or form, right? And even when my users are sending a payment to a different wallet, what usually happens is if that payment goes wrong, my users either ask me or the other wallet what's wrong. Right. So I do tech support for most other wallets, and I assume that other wallets also do tech support for mine. Right. And yeah, so that for me is the other beautiful thing about the Bitcoin ecosystem, open, permissionless. Almost anyone could run a Bitcoin node, a Lightning node, and then send and receive Bitcoin.
Yes, I agree with that, and I think that that is such a brilliant thing that you're working on. And Kasatsu, I really want to champion you and shout you out and give you praise for what you're doing with Manchinkura. To end things off, can you give people your social media handles and any other final last words that you want to give the world before this episode ends?
Okay. Yeah. So Machankura is on Twitter at Machankura 8333. The website is 8333.mobi, right? Okay, no, man, properness. Yeah, but the main takeaway then for me, and this is something I've reiterated in other places. Basically, what is happening is that I believe that there's only 300 Bitcoiners in the world, right? And I'm saying this because assessing and evaluating what some of the more notable Bitcoiners are doing, and what impact that the things that they do have, right? And I'm like, if we would have more Bitcoiners, we would probably get to see so much more stuff if there was actually more than just 300 Bitcoiners. Right? And saying this, looking at places like El Salvador, where they started Bitcoin Beach, and then the president, who's a Bitcoiner, made Bitcoin legal tender, and so on and so forth. You get all Michael Saylor, who kind of gave public companies a playbook to use Bitcoin as a reserve asset. Satoshi Nakamoto himself, right, who built Bitcoin, who started Bitcoin, and so many different people in the space who have done so many different things over time. Saifuddin Ammous, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, right? And yeah, so for me, looking at what they did, and then the assumption with each one of them and each one of their most biggest milestone was that in a few years, everyone else would be doing what they did. Well, not years, but months to be specific. I think I remember Michael Saylor saying that in like 6 months' time, more and more companies would adopt Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset because holding cash was a melting ice cube. He was right because, inflation happened over the next year after he made Bitcoin legal tender, 2 years. But where he was wrong is that other companies would join him. I think only 5 of all the publicly traded companies, 5 or 10 maximum, made Bitcoin a treasury reserve assets. The others just let their money, melt away with inflation. Nayib Bukele, when he made Bitcoin legal tender, was under the assumption that every other country would then, follow suit, specifically countries in the same profile as his country, where they used the USD as a currency, as legal tender. They couldn't, protect themselves from deflation, devaluation or dilution when all these stimulus packages were getting issued. But that was not the case. Well, at least there's one more country added to the list of countries that use Bitcoin as a legal tender, which is the Central African Republic. But it's in its own, category because I feel like there are different laws as well. And yeah, so in my hearts of hearts, I'm like, what would happen with Bitcoin adoption if there was more than 300 Bitcoiners in the world? Right. And I'm not saying that people are not Bitcoiners, even, if they're holding Bitcoin, but I do understand that quite a lot of us have other commitments and other obligations, whether it be work, whether it be home affairs, kids, family. So we haven't had the opportunity to work on the Bitcoin projects we wanted to work on in the fashion that we want to work on them in, right? So we participate in the network, we participate in the community, but we still need to go back either to the fiat job or other obligations, whatever it is. So very few have gotten the opportunity to contribute in the fashion that they deem as their pivotal and highlight contribution. And yeah, so I'd like to see more people adding to the numbers, adding to the ranks, because although there are 300 Bitcoiners, it keeps rotating, I'm contributing what I'm contributing now, and maybe I'll be too tired to continue contributing next year. So whoever comes in needs to come in. Michael Saylor, God bless his consistency, but he's also not the CEO anymore because of MicroStrategy, because that stuff is just, too much. So, yeah, I hope to see more than 300 Bitcoiners, maybe 600 Bitcoiners is what gets us hyper Bitcoinization. And yeah, so we'll just see what the next year holds. But whoever's listening to this, this is an open invitation to them to be a part of the people, part of the Bitcoiners in the world doing whatever they feel like doing, which is what I think is the most important thing. Can we do what we feel like doing? Right. And that is the missing ingredient.
Yes, most definitely. I agree with that. And I think that as time goes on, we will see more people coming into the space, hopefully coming into the space. You're doing your part, I'm doing my part. And once again, Kgothatso, this was a great Bitcoin conversation. I really learned a lot about Machankura, and I'm grateful and honored to have you speak on this episode. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me, man.